Maybe you've never heard the phrase broken arrow, or maybe you have, but it's definitely not a term most people use every day. It's actually a military term used to describe events involving nuclear bombs that were either lost, accidentally detonated, or used in error. So far, thankfully, none of these incidents have triggered a full-scale nuclear war that wiped out everything. Losing a nuclear bomb sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi thriller, but sadly, it's happened more than once in real life. Of course, these kinds of accidents were kept under tight wraps for years, but over time, a lot of the truth has come to light. For example, according to an official statement from the Pentagon, the United States has recorded 32 broken arrow cases involving nuclear weapons. Out of those, at least 6 are publicly known where the lost atomic bombs have still never been found. And since a lot of Cold War-era records are still classified, there's a good chance the actual number of lost bombs is way higher than we've been told. Hey everyone, glad you're here! Needless to say, when it comes to similar incidents involving Soviet nuclear weapons, there's even less information available. The Soviet Union never officially admitted to losing any nukes, and the exact number they misplaced remains unknown, but according to some reports, it could be as high as 30. In many of those cases, the loss occurred when a Soviet submarine sank during an accident. At least 3 such submarine incidents are publicly known, and together they account for the loss of more than 19 nuclear warheads carried on torpedoes and submarine-launched missiles. If you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, be sure to hit that button so we don't lose touch and you never miss out on stories like this. And to everyone joining us today, welcome to our channel. Alright, let's dive right in. Why nuclear bombs get lost. But how is it even possible to lose a weapon as tightly controlled and high-tech as a nuclear bomb? Well, if you look back at history, it starts to make more sense. When hundreds of nuclear weapons are moved around constantly for years on end, it's only a matter of time before something goes wrong. And sure enough, during the Cold War, which dragged on for more than 40 years, these kinds of incidents happened again and again. In fact, when the handling of nuclear weapons becomes so careless that it crosses the line from simple negligence into sheer stupidity, every single safety rule that's supposed to prevent disaster can end up being completely ignored, as real-world cases have shown. So, what are the main reasons behind these terrifying losses of nuclear arms? Let's take a closer look. Aircraft accidents. In most of these situations, nuclear bombs were dropped when planes were damaged, partially destroyed, or falling apart in midair. Maritime accidents. These typically happened when submarines sank during missions under the sea. Pure human error. This includes mistakes like poor navigation, technical mishandling by pilots or crew members, or just plain miscommunication between people on board. Deliberate jettisoning. Sometimes nuclear weapons were intentionally dumped, usually to make landing easier or for other operational reasons. Like most attempts to neatly organize chaos, this kind of categorization forces a wide range of nuclear loss incidents into boxes that don't always fit. The truth is, a lot of broken arrow events were actually caused by a messy combination of several of the reasons listed above. And to be totally honest, the only reason these cases haven't yet triggered a global catastrophe is because, so far, humanity has just been incredibly lucky. That said, it's worth noting that the vast majority of these lost nuclear weapons were equipped with built-in safety systems, specifically designed to prevent them from detonating by accident. The most publicized nuclear weapon losses. We're using the phrase publicized incidents here very deliberately. That's because the most serious nuclear weapon losses may be the ones we still don't know about, and honestly, there's a good chance we may never know the full truth. So for now, we'll focus on the most well-known cases involving the 2 Cold War superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. Let's start with the United States. 1950. B-36 loses a nuclear bomb off the coast of British Columbia. This incident happened during a training flight involving a B-36 bomber operated by the United States Air Force. The aircraft was on a classified mission to deliver a Mark IV nuclear bomb to an airbase in Texas. But 7 hours after takeoff, disaster struck. 3 of the bomber's 6 engines suddenly burst into flames all at once. The crew realized the situation was hopeless and decided to bail out, parachuting down over Princess Royal Island. The pilot was convinced that the atomic bomb on board didn't contain its plutonium core, the part that triggers a chain reaction, so he left the bomb inside the plane. The bomber then stayed in the air for a little while longer, continuing to fly on autopilot before eventually crashing into the ocean. However, according to other sources, the bomb may have actually been jettisoned before the crew abandoned the aircraft, and it's unclear whether the plutonium trigger was truly missing. Out of the 17 people on board, 5 crew members died in the incident, and the exact location where the bomb sank remains unknown to this day. This became the first officially documented case of a lost atomic bomb in history. A full-scale search operation followed, but it ultimately came up empty. Then, something unexpected happened. More than 6 decades later, in 2016, 66 years after the bomb vanished, the story took a new turn. That November, a Canadian diver named Sean Smierczynski discovered a strange-looking object near the Haida Gwaii Islands. At first, he thought it might be a UFO, but it later became clear that what he had found was none other than the missing Mark IV atomic bomb. His discovery was promptly reported to the Canadian military. What happened to the object after that is still a mystery, but according to the official report, it was described simply as a piece of old boat wreckage. 1958. B-47 loses a nuclear bomb off the coast of Georgia. If you're someone who likes things neatly categorized, this case would probably fall under deliberate nuclear weapon jettisoning. The incident happened on February 5th, when a U.S. Air Force B-47 bomber collided mid-air with an F-86 fighter jet over Tybee Island off the Georgia coast. The fighter jet lost a wing and broke apart, but the pilot managed to eject just in time and survived. The bomber also took heavy damage to both its fuel tank and engines. In order to save the aircraft and his crew, the pilot, Howard Richardson, gave the order to jettison the bomb. The bomb was dropped from an altitude of about 7,200 feet and disappeared completely into the marshes of Wassaw Sound, just outside the town of Tybee Island. The B-47 made it safely back to Hunter Air Force Base, and none of the crew were injured. But the same couldn't be said for the 7,600-pound Mark 15 hydrogen bomb. The military searched for it until April of 1958, but the bomb was never recovered. Today, it's believed to lie buried deep in the muddy seabed of Wassaw Sound, in shallow coastal waters ranging from 5 to 15 feet deep. Just like in the B-36 case, officials claimed the bomb did not contain a plutonium core. According to them, it was filled with 400 pounds of high explosives and an unspecified amount of uranium. A formal report released by the U.S. Air Force in 2001 stated that the bomb poses no danger. That conclusion was based on a document written by the B-47 pilot, claiming the plutonium trigger had been replaced with a dummy version for training. But once again, not everyone buys that story. Some military experts argue the report isn't true, pointing to what may or may not be an authentic 1958 Pentagon accident investigation to back up their claims. 1966. Mid-air collision of a B-52G bomber over Palomares. On January 17, 1966, a B-52G bomber collided with a KC-135 aerial refueling tanker in the skies over Spain. It was during a second scheduled refueling operation under clear blue skies above the small fishing village of Palomares. The two aircraft got too close, violating safety protocol, and that's when the collision occurred. During the refueling process, the fuel pipe struck the fuselage of the bomber, tearing off a wing and igniting the fuel in a fireball. 3 crew members ejected from the B-52 before it crashed, and fortunately, a 4th crewman managed to escape by jumping out through the hatch with a parachute. The KC-135's fate was far worse. Flames from the ruptured fuel line spread across the tanker's body, engulfing it in fire before it exploded mid-air. But as terrifying as that was, the situation could have been far more catastrophic. The B-52 was carrying 4 B-28RI hydrogen bombs, each one packing a yield of 1.45 megatons of TNT. These bombs were fully armed and ready for use as part of a mission known as Operation Chrome Dome. Under this operation, nuclear-armed bombers were expected to patrol transatlantic routes and receive mid-air refueling over Spanish airspace. Yet again, luck was on humanity's side. 3 of the bombs were located within 24 hours of the crash. One of them had parachuted safely to the ground and was found almost completely intact. The other 2 slammed into the ground and detonated their conventional explosives, but thankfully there was no nuclear explosion. The impact sites of those detonations were quickly identified. The search for the 4th bomb took much longer, but it was finally discovered on March 15th, lying at the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea, nearly 2,600 feet deep. Its location was pinpointed thanks to the help of a local fisherman. He had witnessed the bomb descending by parachute and drifting out to sea. Even then, the bomb wasn't actually recovered and lifted onto the deck of the American salvage ship until April 7th. And now, as promised, let's turn our attention to the Soviet side of the Broken Arrow story. 1970 – The sinking of submarine K-8 in the Bay of Biscay. In the spring of 1970, the Soviet submarine K-8 was taking part in a massive naval exercise called Ocean 70, alongside 40 other submarines from the Soviet Northern Fleet. On April 8, 1970, while operating in the waters of the Bay of Biscay at a depth of around 525 feet, a fire broke out aboard the K-8, killing 30 crew members. Their sacrifice brought the fire under control, and the submarine, still carrying most of its crew, including the captain, was able to surface. The crew was eventually rescued by a Bulgarian cargo ship named Avoir, but it didn't happen until the next day, and by then, a violent storm with gale-force winds was battering the area. Around that same time, a Soviet support vessel called Slava arrived at the scene and took the surviving crew members aboard from Avoir. K-8 was armed with 4 nuclear torpedoes, and Soviet command was determined to recover the vessel at any cost. So a number of crew members, including the captain, were sent back aboard the damaged submarine to assist with the salvage operation. Tragically, the K-8 sank later that night, taking the captain and 19 other crewmen down with it. All of the fallen sailors were posthumously honored for their bravery. To this day, the submarine remains on the seafloor of the Bay of Biscay, resting nearly 15,350 feet below the surface, along with all 4 of its nuclear warheads. 1989 – The sinking of submarine K-278 Kosmolets in the Norwegian Sea. It's worth highlighting that the Kosmolets, which could dive to an incredible depth of 3,370 feet, was considered the most advanced nuclear-powered submarine in the entire Soviet Northern Fleet at the time. It was also armed with 2 RK-55 nuclear-tipped cruise torpedoes, designed specifically for strategic nuclear attacks. The disaster struck on April 7th. While cruising at a depth of about 1,250 feet, a fire broke out in compartment number 7 of the submarine. Some experts later concluded that the fire may have been caused by the crew's lack of experience. On top of that, the crew was completely exhausted after more than 10 months at sea. Many of the sailors could have been saved, but fearing the risk of leaking classified information, the Soviet crew hesitated to contact Norwegian rescue services. In the end, only 27 men survived. 42 crew members lost their lives. The submarine still lies at the bottom of the Norwegian Sea, about 325 miles off the Norwegian coast at a depth of 5,440 feet, and it still carries its nuclear warheads. Norwegian researchers later confirmed that radiation levels near the wreck site had spiked to hundreds of thousands of times higher than normal background levels. If this story of lost nuclear weapons tells us anything, it's that life on this planet is fragile, and our survival often comes down to nothing more than blind luck. But if you believe in statistics, you know one thing for sure: good luck never lasts forever. And that's where we'll end today's video, with no further conclusions. If you found this story interesting, give it a like and feel free to share it on social media. Thanks so much for watching. Until next time, take care and goodbye.